Hey you guys, thanks so much for joining us again. This is part two of the Unity Crowd series from yours truly. Um, this week we're going to be doing a couple new things that are a little weird and different, but they're things that you really got to know if you want to be developing in Unity. For example, coroutines. We're going to be doing coroutines this time, which are basically threads that run at the same time. It's allowing your project to have multiple running points, kind of like a tree, I guess. Instead of one singular strand, you have multiple strands that are doing multiple things. And it's because we're going to be needing to do multiple things at once. But don't get intimidated. It's really easy. It's just like declaring a function. You just say start coroutine, and then you define the name of the coroutine. So it's just like a function, basically, that runs and runs. Uh, Thank you so much to the new subscribers. You can see we got like 10 or so of you guys. I really, really appreciate that. It's really hard for me to get subscribers. So thank you so much to those of you who decided to subscribe. If you don't want to subscribe, that's completely fine. If subscribing is not your thing, I can't even tell you how many hours of content I've watched on channels that I haven't subscribed to. So the next little thing I wanted to mention is my Twitter profile. If you guys didn't see that yet, this is where I post usually about game dev stuff. And if you're a game dev person, this is where we might be able to connect. If you do stuff, if you do game dev stuff, I'll definitely follow you. So make sure you hit me up. And the third thing I want to talk about is the GitHub profile that I have here. Last video, I was touting that I would put the code in the description, but unfortunately that didn't work out because you can't put angle brackets in the description of a YouTube video. So instead, I posted my GitHub link, and if you do want to find the code, you just go to GitHub/codingwoodsman. That's my handle, and you can see here there's Proximity Manager 1, Proximity Manager 2. Now, Proximity Manager 1 is for the first part. Proximity Manager Part 2 is for the second. So if you want to copy the code from this part, you're going to choose Proximity Manager 2. And I didn't just sort of recommit the latest version because I felt like this would be an easier way for people to find it, as opposed to digging through versions of Proximity Manager. I felt like people might get that wrong and pick the wrong one and then be upset because as they were falling around, things didn't work. Anyways, this is the one you want for this one. Unity Part 2, Unity Crowds Part 2. This is the one for Unity Crowds Part 1, last video. And the last video, if you want to get to where we are now, you want to go back to the Unity Crowds Part 1 video, which I'll add a description. I'll add a link in the description below labeled Part 1 video, so you can find that. All right, so with that, we're off to the races. Thanks so much, you guys. This is the second part. And last part we were talking about flying in a camera and swapping in skin mesh renderers for mesh renderers to save on performance, and it really did save quite a bit on performance. But as a consequence, our models were just sort of static and not doing anything in the periphery, and that's not what we want to do. We want them animating in the periphery, and I hinted at that last video. I said, if you stick with this, maybe we're going to figure out how to get them animating, and so that's what this video is about. It's about taking the idea of them swapping out to a baked mesh that's static to swapping out to an animated or a not a skin, a mesh renderer that swaps in between its baked meshes to create the illusion of an animation, which is similar actually to what a skin mesh render is doing. But we're just going to be swapping out between two frames of that animation to keep it really simple. But there's nothing stopping you from swapping out every frame of the animation. So what I'm really saying to you is that you can have a animated model in that doesn't use a skin mesh renderer that has all the animations in it and it looks smooth. But we're not doing that here today. Today we're just going to be swapping out two extremes of a walking animation. So I'm going to press play just to show you guys what it looks like in the end. It's a little bit wonky. There's a thing or two that needs to be improved, but more or less it does what we want. And you can see here we have our models walking, and as they go into the distance in the periphery, and this is skin mesh renderers, by the way, as it goes into the distance in the periphery, it swaps them out for an approximation of this. And if you can see it if you look closely, it already happened. But to those of you, some of you may have been like, oh, I didn't even notice that. So now we have our mesh renderers on the periphery, and indeed, they are animating. You see what I'm saying? So now we're going to zoom over here and pretend we're in like a Roman watchtower for a second. something like that. We're watching for a group of enemies approaching the fort, right? So we're gonna zoom in, and that if you look at that blur of pixels, the truth is, if you zoom in on a blur of pixelated skin mesh renders, it looks about the same. But oh my goodness, isn't it better to have your game running at 500 frames per second than 50? Do you see the power of it yet? Okay, so we're just going to be running through this, and we're going to be doing this specific case. This is Empire Strikes Back, the second in the series. This is going to be like us taking the idea we learned last time and embellishing it to have the characters in the distance animating. But we're hard coding in the walking animation. So in part 3, Return of the Jedi, we're going to be now pulling it all together, and this is the next video that I'm going to make. And we're going to be making it so these characters aren't all grouped up together. They're not all doing the same thing. They're not doing the same animations, and maybe they're not even the same model, to show you guys that this system really is robust and can work. But for this week, we're going to be doing this. So the first step that we got to do is we're going to, well, what I noticed when I imported this model here is that what a great model, I love it, but it only had idle animation. It didn't have a walking animation, and we need a walking animation for this. But it's a free asset. You can't expect them to have to give you everything. So what I did was I just simply went on this website called Mixamo that a lot of you are already familiar with, and this site, really great site. I believe it's powered by Adobe. And what it allows you to do is upload a model to a web tool, and then it has a bunch of different animations in its library, and it basically applies all of these animations. You can apply them to your model that you specifically uploaded to this website and get your model, flesh the animations out for your model without actually animating yourself. I thought that was a perfect thing to do for this video. So the next thing we're going to do is do that. We're going to basically be taking our model and creating a walking animation from it in this web tool, and then re-importing it back to Unity. Okay? So let's go ahead and do it. Here we go. Okay, I don't know why that, whatever. So I uploaded the model here. You can, so actually, let me back up a bit. So I think it actually is going to prompt you guys to log in. I'm already like automatically logged in, I think, to this guy. So you're going to need to make an account, sign up with your email, blah blah blah, activate it. So once you do that, come back here. You might not need to activate it. I don't really know. But it is an Adobe product, so I'm fond. It is powerful. You can see here that the model is dark. I never really figured that one out. So in the comments, if you ever figured out how to light up the model, it could just be that this model for some reason isn't lit up. I don't really know why. Either way, the next thing we're going to do is you need to upload yours. So you go over here to the button Upload Character, and then you're going to find it in your directory and drag and drop the FBX file into here. So let's do that together, because some of you might be like, what? So let's see here. So you go into your, we're coming into our, just the Explorer of Windows, basically. And what you want to do is you want to find your project in, let me pull this over so you guys can see. So I keep all my Unity project folders here in this directory, but it's going to be different for you. You might be on your C directory. I'm on my E directory, but wherever you keep the saved folder of a new project, that's where you're going to find the model. So in our case, it was proximity mesh test. That's what mine was called. And we're going to be finding the, sorry, let me go back. So you go to Assets after you're in your project folder. You go to Assets, then you go to Catalog, remember. Then you go to Sources, and then you're going to find this is the one we were using right here. So we're going to drag and drop this into Mixamo. It uploads the model, and then you have to line up the wrists and the feet or something like that. You just basically take these 4 circles and you line them up, and then somehow magically the model comes to life with the animations you want. So we're going to do that real quick, see what that looks like. I've obviously already done this, but we're just going to redo it. Anytime. Anytime. So once we're done with this, we're going to have the walking model. All right, here we go. So we're going to click next. You might need to drag, I don't remember when dragging the wrists and stuff happened. So it might be it just did it for me, and for some reason I did it manually last time. But let's just choose any kind of animation. Jogging backwards looks pretty cool. You can choose any walking animation you want. I chose a female walking animation. I'm going to just show you guys how to find it, just so if you want to do exactly what I did. I think I didn't actually finish explaining this well enough. So we should be able to find the one that I used is sort of flippant. Here we go. So it's this one, I think. Yeah. So in place, choose your walking animation in place, then do download. Sorry about that if I screwed that up for you. So this is the one I chose. You could choose any of them, though, is my point. You could choose any of the walking animations, and this will still work. So you download that. Now it's going to come into your screen looking like this. It just basically uses the same name of the model and then tags on the name of the animation afterwards. All right. Mixamo seems to take up a lot of processing power, so we're going to minimize that. All right, so now we're going to basically be dragging and dropping this model into our project. So assets, I'm tempted to just put it right here, inside here, because this is where all the other ones are. Let's see. If we take this little slider and zoom it all the way to the left, yeah, there it is right there. All right, so we're going to drag ours on over to here. See that little plus icon? Now it's imported a model. And if you look at the model, it's a little bit messed up. So we got to do some stuff. All right, so the stuff we got to do. So the first thing we got to do is switch it over from a generic to a humanoid. So select your new model with the walking tag. Go up here into the inspector and click rig, the rig tab, and then go down to humanoid. And now you think you're good, but you're not, because you got to hit apply. I've made that mistake more than enough times. So we're just going to hit apply. Okay, now we can see our model looks a little better, right? Very good. Let's see, what else? Is there anything else that needs to be done? That's the T-pose. And then if we go over to here, yeah, see how it's walking? So that looks good. The materials might be a little messed up. So if we go to the materials tab, I believe it's extract materials. I think you just click this and it just works. Oh God. Let's check that materials folder. All right, that doesn't really look better. Let's see what she looks like on the map. Yeah, the materials are all messed up. Let's take a look at why. We're going to need to expand down. Okay. So there is no material. That's why. That's the problem. So, okay, so let's look at one of our other models just to compare. If we drill down into this one, we're going to see that we have, let's see, materials. Here it is, materials, clothing set, whatever, whatever. On ours, our materials are going to be non-existent. Okay, so we're going to manually set up these materials real quick. So on ours, it was called clothing set 4. So we're going to swap this one out to this guy. Is that correct? I think that's incorrect. Body. It's correct. Okay, let's go onto the boots. The boots are the same material. I think it should do this automatically, but I just must have messed something up. So we're going to do it manually. Okay, pants, I believe, is the same deal. And face. Face is different though. Face is going to be girl texture 01. So we go over here, face. Oh, I'm sorry, girl texture. Girl texture 01. Okay, so now it's starting to look better. What else we got to do? Hair. Hair 01, hair 1. It did seem to import it. I don't really know what went wrong there. And there's still a problem. So we got to figure out what that is. And I believe it's because these three are supposed to be deactivated, if you remember. And then it's just the hands. Hands get the girl material, I believe. I think you can do this automatically, but I couldn't do it for whatever reason. So now we're looking good. Now we got all our materials in, and if we hit play, let's do a let's highlight the camera, game object, align with view. Then we're gonna hit play. We're gonna just see if the animation plays to just verify that everything is working well. And the animation's not playing. Okay, so there's a step we forgot. Probably we just didn't set up the animator, and that's probably all that is wrong. So we gotta wait here for Unity to catch up. Alright. Yep, no animator. And it's the girl AC. So over here you click on the new model you brought in, and then we go over here to the controller. Girl AC, it's the only one. Ah, look at that. Now it's animating. And it's animating the idle, but we want it to animate the walking, right? So we got to go into that this controller here. If we double click it, it should bring up the animator tab, and we're going to be adding a new state. We're going to be adding we're going to be swapping out the animation in the new state. Instead of it being idle, it's going to be walking. So we go over here to the inspector of the state, you click on it, and now it shows up in the inspector, and you can see how it's idle. We're going to be switching that out to walking or Mixamo.com or whatever it was. So, geez, they're both there. Let's try walking and see what happens, because it's more intuitive. And so now it should play the walking animation, theoretically. We'll test that out right now, see if it does. Okay, so it does not. All right, so we're going to switch out the other one for the Mixamo animation instead. I'm not sure how the walking thing got there. Maybe it was... Heck, this might not even work either. Let's try this out. Okay, so it is working. So I was wrong. It wasn't walking like it obviously intuitively should be. It's Mixamo.com. You can actually look in here. That's not going to do it. Right. If you highlight over the, if you drill down into the model, it has these things. I think these are animation clips. Yep. You see animation clip. So it has walking, but it also has Mixamo.com. And if we highlight the model itself, we can go down into the animation tab, and then we can see walking is actually the T-pose thing you can see down here. Let me zoom in. So this is actually walking. If you click on Mixamo, now you can see we're in the first frame. You can actually click this slider here and drag it to see. So I know that that's completely counterintuitive, and we should really rename this walking to T-pose. And I can't remember how that happened, but I had that problem last time. So Mixamo.com, and you can actually rename it. Real walking. Let's call that real walking. And now you can see that's the walking animation, and we're going to just double check and go back into the apply. We're going to go in back to here and just check to see real walking. Cool. So we're good. See that up there? All right, so now we have our model, and it is animating properly. That's the first step. The next step is highlighting your character here, we're going to go over to the animator, and we're going to be double clicking on Girl AC to look at this animator tab again. And you have to make sure that your state transitions into itself. So you right click it and you do say make transition, and then you just click on the state. I doubled up on it because I already had done it, but I just wanted to point that out to you guys. Otherwise, it'll only run once and stop. Okay? Of this video. The next step of the video is going to be the hard step. It's coding, and this is the step that took us an hour last time. I really hope it doesn't take us an hour this time, but it might. And again, if you don't want to go through every single step, you can just go onto GitHub and you can just copy and paste my code. But as you're bringing my copied and pasted code into your Unity scene, you might be like, oh, here's a problem here, there's a problem there, I don't know how to fix them. That's why you're going to want to watch my video. But if you're proficient enough to just be like, I already know this, I already know that, you might save yourself an hour there by trying that. And if you fail, then go watch the whole thing. That's one thing you might want to do. So thanks so much, guys. The next part's the hard part, and I'll catch you there. All right, you guys, so let's get busy. Let's go ahead and we're going to open up our proximity manager script. And if you don't remember how to do that, we're going to go to the main camera, and we're going to go down here, go to our script down here, proximity manager, and we're going to double click right there. So we made some changes this week. We're going to be swapping out that idle animation for the walking one, and we're going to be baking two different moments in that walking animation, and we're going to be swapping out between those two different baked meshes every 10th frame or whatever, every 20th frame or whatever. It's actually more than that, but that doesn't really matter as much. And to do that, we need to run two coroutines. And so let's just get busy here. Let me get everything ready. So we're back in Proximity Manager, and I actually ran a diff tool on if you want to do it like this and have something extra to look at, and just to help expand your abilities. I am diffing the .cs file here, Proximity Manager, with the completed one, Proximity Manager Part 2, which is the one that we're making right now. So if you wanted to diff these two, you can see then in a diff tool sort of what we're going to be doing in terms of the old and the new, and that's a nice way to upgrade your code. But we're going to just be doing it also right here in the editor for you if you just want to follow along and you don't want to do all that. It's just eventually you're going to be maintaining code, and you're going to like some of these tools that are available. So a diff tool or a diff tool, just Google that if you don't know what that is. Many of you already do, of course. Okay, so the first step is we're going to be adding a second list of meshes. Up here, if you remember, last week, each one of these lists represented a list of 3D models that we were going to be rendering. So one of our characters is basically a group of meshes, right? A list of meshes. So we need a second one because the first one's going to be the first frame of the walking animation, and the second one is going to be the second frame. And we're going to be oscillating between these two different meshes. It's going to be like an animation, but an animation with only 2 frames in it. And you'll see what I mean more in a sec. So we're going to just create a duplicate of that. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a couple more private variables. We're going to be adding update index. That's supposed to be an int, sorry about that. And this will make more sense later what the purpose of these are. But if you're familiar with last week, you know I'm fond of indices and variables that keep track of an index of a loop or a for loop. So we're going to be doing that again with update index. We're going to be using a list of bools, and that's to denote whether or not as it pertains to each mesh, whether or not we are in the first frame of the walk animation or the second frame of the walk animation. So really we could do a 1 or 2 thing, but instead we're doing a true-false thing. Okay, the next thing we're going to be adding is a integer, another walk index, another index. All right, that's all we're doing up there. The next thing we're going to be doing is coming down into the private variables, or I'm sorry, into the instantiation of these private variables in the start method. And we're going to be instantiating ours right here. NPC meshes 2 gets new list. And to those of you who watched my video last week, no, I have not fixed my keyboard. It still is sticky. Okay. Okay, so these represent the second pose. So let's just put that in the comments. Okay, so we're just adding a comment. No big deal. And then finally, we got to instantiate those 3 new ones we just added up above. So update index gets 0. Is walk. And if you don't understand these yet, it's fine. We're just instantiating them. You're not going to really get them until we see what they do. Okay, walk index. Okay, so we're just instantiating the list of bools. Now we're instantiating the second index. All right, cool. All right, we're going to keep this from last week. And we're going to be adding to our list of bools isWalk.add true. Because on the first go around, we're basically instantiating the list of bools to all trues as we go. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to be just as we're creating a new list as it ticks over, like we did last week. For the NPC meshes, we're going to be doing the same thing for the NPC meshes 2. We did it for the first frame, now we're going to be doing it to the second frame. So we're just basically copying what we did before here still. Meshes, parenthesis. Alright, so there's that one. Alright, so now we're into the embedded for loop here. Right, okay, so last week we declared the temp mesh to be outside of this for loop, and that actually turned out to be an issue. So we're going to cut this one out. And if you didn't see what I just did, I'm highlighting, whoopsie daisies, oh god, highlighting this temp mesh instantiation. We're going to cut it out, and we're going to be doing it on the inside of this if loop because it needs, oh god, because it needs to be the scope of the scope of this variable needs to die basically after the end of this if statement. So we're going to be, like we created our first, we are now going to create our second, and we're going to name this one temp mesh 2, right? So we're copying and pasting this line, and then we're going to add the 2 here. Okay, so we're instantiating the first mesh, instantiating a second mesh, and these are temporary meshes. We're just going to be adding them to a list, and then we don't care what happens to these 2 variables. They're just going to be created again and added to a list again. All right, so we're going to now add that to the list. Let's see here. Temp mesh, that all looks good. So after this one, we need to add the second one. Temp mesh 2 gets dot name. We're going to give it a name because we're going to need to find it later. Let's see, my mesh 2. 2 plus j plus dash for a separator plus k, semicolon. And then we're going to need NPC meshes. The jth NPC meshes. Of course, we're going to do 2, right? Almost forgot that. It's really important. NPC meshes 2, the ith element dot add, because we're adding to a list of lists, remember. Add temp mesh 2, semicolon. And just take a look at that, make sure it looks right. This should be temp mesh 1, or temp mesh only, rather. And there we go, that looks right. These two line up too. We're using 2 and 1. Nice, that looks good. Let's move on. And then we're keeping the game object, temp go. We're going to be adding the components mesh renderer and mesh filter. We're going to be, this is all the same. We keep this all the same. We don't need to touch that. Moving down, the bake is the same, and the j, incrementing j is the same. And just to clean this up, let's get rid of that line. All right, now moving on to the update function. The update function, oh, I'm sorry, we're not moving on to the update function. So there's the last semicolon of the start method, and the start method we need to kick off the 2 coroutines that we're going to be writing. So the first one is the one for swapping. Let's just write that out. Coroutine for swapping out between 2 meshes in a way to approximate an animation. So our animation has 2 frames in it, essentially, is what I'm trying to say. It'll make more sense. When we actually run it, you'll see what I'm talking about. Coroutine, walk swap. That's going to be the name of our coroutine, and we're going to do a second coroutine as well. This coroutine, the purpose of this is to animate them, to make them move. So they're going to be walking, but they're not going to be walking in a static pose. They're going to be actually gliding across the screen as they walk. I call it smooth walk because I didn't intend for it to be so smooth. In the end, it ended up working out better this other way I did it, where when I first did it, as they were translating across the screen, they would translate in a discrete way, like they animate, like walk frame 1, walk frame 2, walk frame 1, walk frame 2. But it wasn't really working out, and instead I tried to animate it as we're going to be animating the skin mesh renderer, which is in a smooth way, not discrete, more continuous, more, a nice smooth looking walk. I ended up making the mesh renderers have the smooth walk as well, and it worked out really well, I thought. So that's canon now. We're moving on. So these are our 2 coroutines. They don't exist yet. Okay, so you might get it might flag an error. It might not. I'm not really sure what it's going to do. All right, so we're moving on to update. I don't see an error popping up, so I guess you can just kind of throw out whatever coroutine name you want. We'll figure that out later. So in the update method, I believe this is where things changed. Trying to see where real quick here. It looks like it's exactly the same. All right, the update method doesn't change. Nice, that's awesome. I was hoping it wouldn't. All right, we're gonna move down to the next one. I'm still just sort of checking back, like, is that true? Is that true? I guess it's true. All right, so this next one, bake it. Oh, you know what? Actually, before we get into bake it, we're going to be doing the coroutines. So just like we define a function, like bake it, void bake it, or you could do private void bake it, public void bake it. We're going to be doing the same thing, but with a coroutine. So it's just like doing a function, and instead of void, we're going to do IEnumerable, and we're going to name it the name of the coroutine that we specified earlier, walk swap. Give it curlies. All right. All right. Why is that freaking out? I think it's freaking out because, right, inside a coroutine, it needs a way to handle how it continues to run, and we're not telling it to do it how to do that yet. So it's not like it's like not having a return variable, kind of what's happening now. So we're going to do. I saw this online, and I'm just copying this method. This is not my specific preference, but it works, and I kind of liked it, so I'm moving forward with it. So basically for everything, if first grouping. Okay, so this is kind of weird what I'm about to do. So instead of having them all animate at exactly the same time, I have them kind of staggered into groups. And in doing that, it looks like they're walking independently. Okay, so that's why we're going to be calling this function on one of 4 groups at a time. And that's just to stagger them. So we're staggering so they don't look like synchronized swimmers. We're staggering them, and this is when we're going to use the walk index. And I don't really expect you to understand what I mean by this. Just off the top of your head, it'll make more sense as we go, just like I've been saying. Animate group 0. And we're not going to have animate group exist yet, and that's okay. And then we're going to do else if walk index. So this is sort of like a switch statement we're doing, if you're familiar with switch statements, but we're doing it in the form of a if else 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 kind of deal. Animate group 2, or 1 rather. And there's not that many of them. I think I did 4, so we're almost done. Else if walk index equals 3, 2, yep, curly's animate group 2. And so after that, there's we're going to need, we're going to do else if walk index equals 3, animate group 3, struggling today. And then we're going to have our else do nothing, because we like that. It just sort of weirdly helps me sometimes. Like I'll catch errors by putting a debug statement here. I don't know why. You don't have to do that though. You could just do, you could just end it off of this, or you could actually take out this last statement, because it's just going to be 3 anyway if it's not 0, 1, 2, or 3. But this is how I do it. Yield. But if you're adamantly against that, that's okay. You don't have to do that. New. So this is the return statement. See what I was talking about with the return statement? And once we return something, the walk swap won't have an error in it anymore. And this is the key to making it go for every umpteenth second. And this is how you sort of, you don't have to use frames in the update. So as you're learning how to time things in your game, you might be tempted to use the update function to time things. Be like, oh, on this frame, do that. And, every, 10 frames do this. But what you really should be doing is keeping it in alignment with like the system clock, because as you move forward and your systems that you develop on get more sophisticated, people are going to take your old game and run it on a new computer, and it's going to run really, really fast. and people are going to be like, oh, that's funny, this game didn't scale up very well. But if you base your time blocks based on a system clock, it will, and your game will still run on like a dream on a new computer. Anyways, of course, we're not really that worried about that, but just using this trick of using coroutines and doing the yield statement with wait for seconds, we're going to do 0.1. It's a float, you pass it. So make sure you put the F afterwards. It's using the system clock, which is just good practice, I think. Now, you don't want to have 1,000 coroutines, though, is another thing. You don't want to have your program inundated by coroutines. All right, that looks good. We're going to move on to the second coroutine, which is going to be, remember, IEnumerable, smooth walk. what is IEnumerable? I don't know whether I should even try to explain that or not, because I don't know if I even understand it enough. But right now, I'd just say, just don't worry about it. Just learn that that's the word that you have to use for. I can't explain it well enough, but I strongly urge you to actually go and try to figure that out. I believe it has something to do with like iterating through something. I just can't remember off the top of my head. So if you want to learn about that, make sure you watch a YouTube video about that. I'm sure somebody does a good job explaining what's going on. So we're going to do our nice little for semi curly, and we're going to be throwing in. So we're going to first be assigning the position. Essentially, this is the key statement for translating an object across the screen. We're going to just be updating, in this case, the Z position. And by incrementally updating the Z position in a for loop, which we're going to add right now, int I gets 0, is less than npcs.count I++. I'll show you what I'm talking about right now. NPCs, so the ith NPC, in other words, the game object, one of the units in the list of game objects we have that are representing people. It gets kind of weird to try to explain these things. Transform.position gets new vector 3. Oh god. So we're going to be passing a new vector 3 into the position of this NPC, which is going to be an updated Z position, essentially, by not very much. So this is a little bit, the way I coded this up is a little bit, what's the word? Verbose, I suppose. And so you might want to save this into a variable for the sake of your sanity. I did not do that. I kept it as it is, and I think one of these lines goes into like the 150th character or something. So if you're somebody who likes to print out code and look at it, this is going to be painful for you. But something tells me that nobody does that anymore. So people like me can finally just have a line of code that really just is 200 characters long, and that doesn't matter anymore, as we all hoped. Transform.position. So now we're doing the Y, and then we're going to do, so the X is the normal one, the Y is the normal one, the Z is the one, if I forgot an S there, messed up the R, struggle with that word, forgot the dot operator. This is the only one we're updating. I really should have just copied and pasted at this point. Let's see, it's too late though now, we committed. Dot transform dot position dot Z oh whoops, dot square root of no, not that, plus so we're just going to be adding a little bit onto this Zth coordinate, and we're going to be adding, I tinkered around with this a bit, and you can tinker with it too. It's something that is sort of up to you. That's the number I ended on. Okay, so inside our for loop, we're updating the Z position. The next thing we're going to do is create another for loop. You know how I like my nested for loops. J0, J is less than NPC meshes game object indexed by the ith element dot count J++, increment J. All right, so NPC meshes go indexed by the ith jth, and I know some of you are starting to make those noises like, oh god, dot transform dot position gets new vector. So what we're doing here is we're transforming all of the game objects associated with this same NPC. So we're not just transforming the game object with the skin mesh renderer up here, i.e. up here, in this line. We're going to be translating all the game objects associated with the mesh renderers that we baked from the skin mesh renderer also. Okay, and we're always using a for loop to do that because it's always a list of stuff. And that's why it's a list of stuff and all that stuff. All right, let's finish up this line. Transform gets new vector 3. And we're doing, this is going to be what we did before. And there's going to be a bunch of, this is going to be a long line. So this is what's going to make the professors pull their hair out at the university for you violating coding standards. And you're going to violate them anyways. X position.y. So I'm copying and pasting this. Sorry, I should mention that. And we're doing our .y, .x, and .z from this position. So .x, .y, and then of course .z, but we're going to increment z, right? So paste .z gets, or I'm sorry, not gets, plus, and we're using the same float, that fractional float we used before. So the point of that is that they're moving at the same rate. So these numbers do have to be the same. If you made this one different, you got to make this one the same thing as that. All right, semi. And then the last thing we need for an enumerable, of course, is the yield, and make sure it's inside that semi, right? Semi for loop. So right after the the middle child nested for loop, we're going to put in the yield statement. New wait 4 seconds. And if you're ever thinking like, I could never do this, that's what I think when I watch other people coding. But it's like they don't do it right there. They incrementally test things as they go, and they figure it out as they go. That's how I code. So I didn't write this whole thing and then hit run and it worked. That's ridiculous. This took me like a week of playing around with stuff and testing. And so, yeah, don't be discouraged. Eventually you're going to be making these videos. Bake it. Let's see. Did bake it change? Oh, man. I just feel like I'm going to miss something in bake it. So let's save. By the way, save. Although it doesn't really matter. You could just copy and paste the completed version from the GitHub part 2. All right. Bake. So we're on bake. All right. I'm looking at the what I've done here. So the first thing I did is I deleted this one because it was redundant. And in the last video, I kind of mentioned that, but I didn't do anything about it. In this case, we really did delete the redundant thing. So get animator call, blah, blah, blah. That stays. So we're calling the animator, right? We're taking the animator off the game object. And then, like last time, I explained this better last time. And then what we're doing is we're saving it to a so the sample animation function. So this guy we're going to be calling, we could do it on the 0th frame, but instead we're going to choose to do it on the 0.2th part of the spectrum from 1 to 0 on the animation. So 0.0 would be the first frame, 0.5 would be the middle frame, and 1 would be the final frame. So we're snapshotting at a fifth of the way through the walking animation. And if you remember, we swapped out the walking animation for the we swapped out the idle animation for the walking animation, rather. Okay, so that stays. So that's the thing that changes there, the sample animation time, and that's it. We're keeping everything else the same. All right, we have the same list of skins. All right, let's see here. I have some debug statements. We're not going to carry those over. We're going to still do list of skins bake mesh, but we're going to be baking out something different. We're going to be baking out the jth ith element of NPC meshes, which is the thing we used before. So we're going to delete this, and then we're going to put in here, we're going to put npc meshes ji. All right. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go down to the if statement, and I believe we're setting up the materials all the same way, so this all remains the same. Remember, there were 3 materials from last week, and if yours has 1 material, you wouldn't need to maintain 3 different mesh templates. You would just need to maintain 1. So there wouldn't be an if block of 3. There would be you would just be assigning the materials straight up in 1 line. All right. So after we do the materials, we're not going to be doing this anymore. This is redundant. So GameObject.transform. I'm going to Control Z that, so you see we're going to delete this line here. Okay, and then we're going to be deleting this line as well. So we're no longer doing position statements inside the bakeIt method. Let me just verify that's correct. I don't want to. Oh, I'm sorry, that's incorrect. Inside, I'm sorry, the for loop, the list of skins for loop. We're taking them out of that. We're doing them somewhere else. Okay, so we're getting rid of this. And because this is no longer a relevant comment, we're actually going to take that out just for tidying housekeeping's sake. Okay. I like that line there. All right. So after this for loop, we're going to be doing another for loop. This next for loop is going to be essentially we're going to be doing that same position idea, but inside the for loop to be able to snap all of the elements of the list of things we baked. We're going to be changing all of their positions. So for int I, and I know I didn't explain that in the best way. I think the truth is I'm not explaining a lot of things in the best way. It's just sort of hard to do all this all at once and try to think like how can I explain that in a good way. Some of the things are just hard to explain in the end, but I know that if you use this and you commit to using this system, you're going to be able to understand it and augment it the way you want to. And so I'm just trying to do my best to allow you guys to be able to do that. All right, so we got our first for loop. Inside the for loop, we're just going to be changing the position of the NPC meshes game object list of list. So NPC meshes game object jth ith dot transform dot position, like we did before. And remember, this is a vector 3, gets game object capital O dot transform. And remember, you may have made an error by referencing GO. It's not G0, it's GO. I just want to point that out one more time. And that's not clear. I really should have done it differently in retrospect. But what's done is done. Position. It's not like I can delete things and copy and save. And so we're reassigning the position. That's all. And well, I forgot I messed something up. The S. I always forget that S. All right. Save that, and there's one more for loop. But before that, we have to. So remember, we're doing it twice to 2 different parts of the skin mesh renderer. It's baked into 2 different positions now, so we have to do it twice. So that means we have to do this sample animation command again, because we sampled it on the first of our 2 frames in our 2-frame walking animation, which I know is a mouthful. We need to do it on the second of the 2 frames of our walking animation. So the way we're going to do that is just by sampling at a different part of the animation, and I chose 0.6. And you could choose like 0.1 and 0.8. You could choose 0 and 1. That's just what I chose. And then we have to do the for loop again for this case. So int I gets 0. I is less than jeepers. What is I less than? The list of skins dot length. I Okay. And we're going to be doing list skins ith element dot bake mesh npc meshes to ith. Oh, I'm sorry, jth ith. Ooh, I almost made the mistake again. Jth ith. So where did I screw that up? Did I do this? Nope, that looks good. And everything else looks pretty good. Don't forget the semi. I'm going to save it. I think that's all to the bake function that we got to do. So now it's all about the last function we have to write. And this function is what I called, if you tried to run this now, you'd see this errors up here because we're using this animate group, copy and paste, function that we haven't defined yet. So we're going to finally define that guy. So at the second to last curly bracket, we're going to be defining that. So void copy paste animate group. It takes an integer. We're going to call that group number so it doesn't interfere with my copious use of the index I, which of course is going to happen again. If you remember our triple deke from last week, we're going to use that trick again. Animates the group passed in. This is used to stagger, that was the word I was looking for earlier, the animations so they don't look like synchronized swimmers. Yes. Why don't we take that to a new line? So they don't look like synchronized swimmers. Okay. Parameter the group to animate. All right, let's copy that, or let's save that. All right, so this is the final function. Let's code it out. So this is all going to be new. So there's no kind of comparing to the last thing we did. This is all brand new for every, which is kind of nice, for every game object. Holding a mesh component. So that's what this for loop is. So of course, int I gets 0, I is less than npc meshes game object dot count I plus plus. Okay, so for. All right, so we have our first for loop. All right, so let's write another comment. If it is 1, as in we're not talking about the list of meshes anymore. We're talking about the grouping or the group number, the index passed in. So if it's 1, 2, or 3, just to help you understand, or group for's turn, if is walk I, remember that list of bools? This is checking to see if this particular mesh's animation is frame 1 or frame 2. So if it's frame 1, we'll do frame 1. And to do frame 1, we need another for loop. So int j, because we already used I, gets 0, j less than npc meshes game object ith dot count, because we're in the nested one, so now we're referencing the ith element of the npc meshes go. And if that didn't make any sense to you at all, that's okay. Doesn't make sense to me either. npc meshes go ith jth dot get component mesh filter. So this is how we're referencing and swapping out the mesh associated with the baked mesh. So mesh filter, parentheses dot mesh. That's how you find this. It's this variable. So your mesh filter is going to have a mesh field in it that you dragged and dropped a mesh onto. Or you could instantiate it through code like this. You can control what is in the inspector through code. That's what we're doing. So we're swapping out what isn't. Okay, you know what? This warrants me going in and having you look at what I'm talking about. So in this case, we can look at a skin mesh renderer actually. The same applies. So in the skin mesh renderer, you see that there's an associated mesh right here. This mesh field is actually a mesh. It's actually a three-dimensional object. So we're swapping this out in this field. Do you see? But not specifically in this specific one, where it would be a mesh renderer up here. But it doesn't exist yet because we have to run the game for them to exist. So we're just swapping out that. I just wanted to make that more clear because it's not exactly clear what's going on, but you can control what those fields are in the inspector through the code. Okay, I know most of you know that. Let's keep going. NPC meshes I j dot name. And this time it's not ji because my first iterative thing is I, and my second is j. And in the bake method, it's just flipped around the other way just because of how I did it. So this should be correct. Dot name. It's throwing something back at me. What did I mess up here? Oh, because it's not dot name. that would come back a string, not a. So sorry. It's just NPC message ith jth. All right. So now what's wrong? Is there still an error? I believe there's. Oh, it's just because of. I need to keep going. I think that's all. Okay. So. I don't know. There shouldn't be that many errors, right? I think there must be something else that's wrong. Give me just 1 sec to just look through here. The parenthesis shouldn't be there. Good. But now we just need to do. We need to swap out this flag. That's the other thing we're going to need to remember. Remember, now that we've gone through and baked the first walking frame, we need to be able to bake the second walking frame next time. So that means we have to flip the Boolean around. So we do the opposite. So isWalkI gets not isWalkI. So in both cases, whether it's true or false, it'll come out the opposite. Okay? So that should conclude the if walk else. Else, it's the second case. So we're going to do another for loop. Int j gets 0 like before. J is less than NPC meshes go game object ith, right? Dot count, like we did before. J++. Okay, now let's flesh out that for loop. And in the for loop, we're going to be doing NPC. And some of you might actually already know what is coming. And good for you, you're starting to get it. But if you, that's okay if you're still what the heck's going on. Don't worry about it. In the end, if you can't quite grasp all of this, it's still a great starting point for you to save a lot of frame rates on your game, even if you don't want to tweak it and change it and make it work better for you and optimize it. Even this, just right now as it is a good starting point for you. And you trying to do this hard stuff is good for you. You're learning more about programming. Programming's hard. And the more you do it, the better, the easier it gets, the more you can just intuitively start to understand what's going on. I don't think I'm at the point quite yet where I can just kind of read and understand at a high level what's going on all the time. But more and more I am getting to that point where I can just kind of look at someone else's code and be like, oh, I see what he's doing here. And then I don't need to actually have a piece of paper and write out all the variables like I used to anymore. Now I can be like, oh, that's a for loop, that's doing that. And of course, I've introduced a horrible error here, so we gotta figure out what that is. That's because I forgot meshes. I did mesh go. All right, and I just want to make sure I look at that line one more time to make sure that it's correct. It looks correct to me. Okay, and then of course, as we did before, we want to make opposite the Boolean flag that we just used above, just like we did before. I think these can be tightened up, actually. This could be refactored, I think, but we're not going to refactor it right now. Okay, so, right. So we've swapped out the meshes. That's what this did. Now the next thing we need to do is if group number equals 3. Okay, so we're passing in 0, 1, 2, and 3 as a parameter in animate group, and they're doing different things in each case, but they're so similar that it's not worth even having a specific case for 0, 1, 2, and 3. We were able to do it generically and instead use this group number. But the only reason we're really keeping track of it was because we want to know in the case that group number is 3. And it's because we're kind of doing something similar to a mod operator, but we're not doing a mod operator. We're instead waiting until it's the last element of a, something's wrong here. What did I do here? Second curly. I messed something up. I don't know what it is. I think it's because I put it, okay, sorry guys. This is supposed to go, I put this outside of the function. That was a mistake. So copy that one, cut that rather. Some of you probably already did that and you're like, what's he doing? Sorry. Okay, so now I think I deleted one by accident. All right, so the point is we're putting in an if block. Make sure it looks like this, where there's 2 curlies after the end if block curly. Okay? All right, so inside this, if for this specific case, we're basically done now. This is all just a couple more lines. Walk index equals 0. So we're doing like a mod operator, so it ticks over. It's like iterating through 1 through 3 and then going back to 0. 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, right? And then else. The reason I say it's kind of like a mod operator is because that is kind of what a mod operator does. It iterates through like a remainder. It's the remainder of dividing 2 numbers. So it kind of does this like same idea as like the 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3. This is another way to do it without using the mod operator. I believe it's technically slightly more efficient because the mod operator, I believe, does use a divide, and divides are always nasty. Okay, cool. Let's save it. So, right, so if it's the group number 3, start over at walk index equals 0, else just increment walk index. Do you see? Okay, so we're going to save that. All right, so you know how it goes. Theoretically, after you do a lot of work on a project, on code, and you don't test as you go, you know you're in for a world of pain. The first thing we have to do is create a bunch of new, just like I make you do every time 100 times. If you see here, if we were to press play, this is the only one that this will work on because this is the only one with a walking animation. It's the only one with a proper animator controller with a proper real walking motion setup. We're essentially, for the sake of Empire Strikes Back Part 2, we're essentially proving that this concept works for the walking animation. We proved that it works for the idle animation, except that the idle animation is just a baked single frame. In this case, we're proving that we can walk and translate across the screen. And so that way, we're bringing our non-animating characters to life by animating them, right? All right, you guys, so we are going to be deleting all of the non-walking models. That's the next step. So we're going to go into the hierarchy, select them all, right-click, delete. This will take a little while. 21 seconds. Oh, no, that was quick. So definitely it's faster to delete things from the hierarchy. We're going to move down. We made this mistake last time. We're going to move down home girl. We're going to also start to duplicate, right? As we do, Control D. And what's going on? Where is it? All right, so my PC started to act up when I did that one, so I think I'm good on that. 512, although you could do more. I think that the system is, it sort of lends itself to doing even more and more and more. But I don't want to go too nuts, because I'm not even sure this is going to work. Oh, I did it again where I dragged and dropped. Ah, that was stupid. All right, so I think if we press play now, we're going to see our first error. And let's hope there's not one, you guys. Let's hope this one just works, because I know this video is already an hour long. Yep, error. And now they've all disappeared. Okay, so we got to figure out what the problem is with that. And we will. All right, you guys, I finally figured it out. It was a crazy one. It was one of those ones. And I figured out a bunch of other problems along the way too. So I made a list. These are all the things that went wrong. First of all, I noticed that the people that we generated had a whole host of offsets, and I had to zero them out. So like we did before, you want to go into each one of these children and go into the transform and make sure that the rotation and position are all zeroed. For body, boots, pants, face, make sure the rotation and position, hair, arms. I didn't do these three, so you can see these three still are all messed up. Or these four, rather, these deactivated ones. So you're going to do that. Okay, so you're going to delete all the hard work you did by setting up all those things, right? And then we're going to start over. We're going to make sure it runs correctly first. And so the problem was, like I said, first the offsets. Fix all the offsets. And then we're going to have to mark apply root motion. So go up here, select on the prefab of your model up here, and come over to here and untick apply root motion. Okay, untick that one. The next thing we have to do is come into the code again. Oh, I'm sorry, before we move on, switch this to always animate as well. The culling mode, always animate. Okay, and there were two errors with our code. The first one was down in animate group. I put a bunch of different debug statements in here to try to figure out what's going on. And it's because the problem wasn't in this method. I kept coming up and up and up and being like, well, why isn't it entering here? Well, why isn't it entering here? I should have just seen if it was entering the method in the first place. Whatever. So the problem was that we missed an if block. I put it in right here. So right after this one, where you're testing for every game object that's holding a mesh component, we have this comment here, if 1, 2, 3, or 4. It's depending on the group number's turn, we're going to add if I mod 4. So you're adding this line and this curly, and then this end curly. So we're only doing group. I was talking about it down here, but I forgot to add this if block. Okay, so add your if block here. Make sure the end of the if block matches here. It's inside the for loop, this if statement. Okay, and the last thing, and this one was the thing that took me, I think, probably an hour, maybe longer to figure out, is the coroutines weren't running for no apparent reason. The reason was because I had this set to I enumerate. I'm going to rewrite it. I enumerable, because I auto-completed and just thought that was all good. It's not I enumerable. It's I enumerator. And oh my god, that annoyed me. So make sure yours is I enumerator. That's really important. And even when I went in and I diffed it, I didn't notice it. So it even got by my diff. I enumerator, I enumerable. All right. I'm just going to get rid of a couple more debug statements that I put in. And then we're going to duplicate the model again and then hopefully, hopefully, now it will run. So we're going to duplicate the model, elevator music. Sorry for doing this to you guys again. All right, that's good. So we have 250, something like that. I don't want to go too far past that because at that point, there's kind of diminishing returns in terms of what I've been talking about. This particular model has 3 different materials, and as you can see, it has a bunch of different meshes that we're baking in concert, and that's kind of not an efficient way of doing things. So as we expand this model out, it's going to become more and more bogged down. So let's try it with 250, and we'll see what happens. Make sure our script is. Do we want to start it on or off? Let's start with it off, just to see what happened. What happens when we don't have animated mesh component. So here you can see we're getting about 90-ish, 80, 70 when we're zoomed far away, 80, 90. So it's just kind of steady at 90, which is pretty good. And they're all skin mesh renderers, all 250 something. So now let's turn on our guy and see if we see any gains. $1.50. Oh yeah, so massive. You can see it almost doubled the frame rate. I tested this in a huge case, and it wasn't as pronounced. And I was trying to figure out why. It's because our system isn't really that optimized. The proximity manager code we made, it could be way better. We wouldn't have to do everything every frame, and also we could check to see if we really want to bake something as it moves in and out. There's things we're doing every single frame that we don't have to do every single frame. And so that's a way to make, and I intend on making it more efficient. But you can see here, we're sporting a nice 150. We zoom in, we're seeing some nice clean animations. We zoom out, and they're all kind of still walking, aren't they? And if we zoom way out and we use the scale slider, it really looks about the same as well, maybe that doesn't. Let's go back down here. Eye level with the player. So there you go, guys. There it is. Part 2, Empire Strikes Back. This is how we're going to be doing crowds. And it's like I said, it can be more efficient. And Return of the Jedi, Part 3, is going to be taking this, and instead of using it in sort of a specific case of walking and idling on a plane, we're going to be taking it into a more advanced kind of thing of having different models, having them. We might not do different models, I'm not sure, but certainly models in different stages and different animations. And what we're going to be doing is swapping out those specific animations based on the animation they're playing at that time, instead of just hard coding it in to be walk. So that's what we're going to be working on next week, you guys, if I can get there. And time for a little words of encouragement. Game dev's hard. I just saw a Twitter post of some kid who was like, I just made a FPS game in 30 minutes. Why does everybody say game dev is so hard? And I just kind of chuckled to myself. It really is hard. It's hard to take it beyond the first stages of just sort of making a game off of a template. What you'll find, the first game I made was just a couple hills and some grass, and it ran at 4 frames per second, and it was a huge eye-opening experience for me that I really didn't understand how to make a game run well. And that's very much as much of the battle as anything else. So I hope that you guys don't get discouraged. Here's a starting point for you to get some frame boosts and have crowds. It's not perfect. It needs to be refactored. It needs to be optimized. We're doing things that are inefficient right now. We have 2 coroutines running all the time. We could probably get that down to 1. A couple other things like that. So thank you so much, you guys. I really, really appreciate all the love and support. You have to have the desire. Ganas, you know what I'm saying? You have to have the desire to succeed. Having the desire to succeed trumps everything else. It trumps talent. It's really just a question of, do you really want it? And if you're here and you're watching this, you do. You're not making concessions. You're making the hard game that you envisioned you wanted to make. I'd like to say these are the seeds of success, but I don't really know yet. So until then, you guys keep trying, don't give up, and walk softly and carry a big dream. This is The Peasant. Peace out.